Look around you right now. Your desk, your phone, the air you are breathing. What if I told you that none of it is real? That everything you have ever touched or tasted or felt is just data running on some incomprehensibly powerful computer. Sounds crazy, right? Like some stoner thought at 2 a.m. Except some of the smartest people on the planet genuinely believe this might be true. Physicists, philosophers, tech billionaires. They have looked at the math and they have looked at the nature of reality and they said that there is actually a decent chance we are all living inside a simulation. So today, I want to break this down properly. Not that we live in the Matrix clickbait version. I'm talking about the actual argument where it came from and the evidence people point to and the problems with it and what I personally think about all of it. And honestly, by the end of this video, you may not look at reality the same way again. Let us get into it. So first things first, this idea didn't start with Elon Musk or Joe Rogan's podcasts. It, do- it did not even start with the Matrix. This concept has been haunting human beings for thousands of years. Let us go way back. Around 380 BC, Plato wrote this allegory, which is the allegory of the cave. Imagine a group of people chained inside the cave their entire lives. All they can see are shadows on the wall, cast by objects passing in front of the fire behind them. To these people, the shadows are reality. They do not know there's a world outside the cave. And Plato's point was that what if that is us? What if what we think is real are just shadows? Then you have Rene Descartes in the 1600s. This guy sat in a room and basically said, what if there is an evil demon deceiving me into thinking everything is real? He questioned literally everything, including his body and the world and other people. The only thing he could not doubt was the fact that he was doubting. That is where I think therefore I am comes from. But the modern version, which is the one that actually has scientists taking it seriously, comes from a philosopher named Nick Bostrom. In 2003, he published a paper called Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? And it laid out what is now known as the simulation argument. Here is the core of it. Bostrom said one of three things must be true. One is that almost all civilizations at our level of development go extinct before they become technologically capable of running simulations. Basically, we blow ourselves up before we get there. Two is that advanced civilizations that could run simulations chose not to. Maybe they think it is unethical, or maybe they are just not interested. Or three is that we are almost certainly living in a simulation right now. That's it. One of those three has to be true. And what makes this argument so uncomfortable is that option 3 is not the weird one statistically, because it might be the most likely one. Alright, so let us get into the actual arguments for why we might be simulated. And I have to be honest, some of these are genuinely hard to shake off. Argument number 1 is the progress of technology. Think about where video games were 50 years ago. Pong, two white bars and a dot. Now look at where we are today with photorealistic open worlds and AI characters that react to your behavior and physics engines that simulate water and gravity in real time. We went from prong to this in 50 years. Now imagine where we will be in another 50, or 500, or 10,000. At some point, if technology keeps advancing, and there is no reason to think it will not, then we will be able to create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. Conscious beings inside a computer who genuinely believe they are real. And here is the kicker. If that is possible, even once then, whoever runs the simulation could create billions of simulated worlds, which means the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the one base reality. So statistically, what are the odds that we just happen to be in the original one? Almost zero. Argument number two is that the universe runs on math. That is subtle but gets under your skin. Everything in our universe, from the orbits of planets to the behavior of subatomic particles, follows precise mathematical rules. Physics is essentially code. It is like the universe has an operating system, and we have been slowly reverse engineering its source code for centuries. Why would reality run on elegant mathematics unless it was designed that way? A truly random natural universe could be chaotic and ruleless, but ours has structure and constants and laws, almost like parameters someone set. Argument number three is that quantum mechanics is suspicious. Okay, this one is wild. In quantum physics, particles exist in a state of probability, so they do not have a definite position or state until they are observed. The moment you look at them, they collapse into a specific state. Sounds familiar? That is exactly how a video game works. The game does not render what you are not looking at. It only loads the part of the world the player is currently observing. Why waste processing power on stuff nobody is seeing? Some physicists have pointed out that this is eerily similar to how a simulation would optimize its resources. Do not render what nobody is watching. Argument number four is the sheer scale of probability. Elon Musk put it bluntly by saying, there is a 1 in billions chance that this is based reality. His logic goes like this. If it is even possible to simulate consciousness, and we are getting closer every year, then eventually some civilization will do it. And they won't do it once. They will do it billions of times. So the ratio of simulated worlds to real worlds is billions to one. And we are probably on the wrong side of that ratio. Now here is the thing. As compelling as those arguments sound, there are some serious problems with the simulation theory. And I think it is important to be honest about that. Problem number one is that the computing power does not exist and might never. To simulate an entire universe down to every atom and every quantum interaction, you would need a computer so powerful it might actually be physically impossible to build. Some physicists have run the numbers, and the energy required to simulate even a small portion of the universe at full resolution would exceed the energy output of entire galaxies. And here is the thing. Bostrom's argument quietly assumes that computing power will just keep growing forever. But there are hard physical limits. We are already bumping up against the limits of how small transistors can get. Quantum computing might help, but even quantum computers have constraints. There is no guarantee that infinite computing power is actually achievable. Problem number two is that consciousness might not be simulatable. This is a big one. We do not actually know what consciousness is. We do not know how it arises. We do not know if it is purely a product of computation or if it is something else entirely. Some philosophers argue that subjective experience, which is what it feels like to see the color red or to feel pain, cannot be reduced to information processing. If that is true, then no computer, no matter how powerful, could create a truly conscious simulated being. It could create something that acts consciously, but there would be nobody home. Problem number three is that it is unfalsifiable. Here is what the simulation theory starts to feel less like science and more like faith. There is no experiment you can run to prove we are not in a simulation. Any glitch or anomaly could be explained by sufficiently advanced simulation. Any evidence could be planted, and you cannot peek behind the curtain. And in science, if you cannot test it or you cannot falsify it, then it is not really a scientific hypothesis. It is speculation. Some would say it is closer to religion than physics because you are essentially saying there is an all-powerful creator who designed everything, but you just swapped God for a programmer. Problem number four is that the ancestor simulation assumption is shaky. Bostrom's argument assumes that a future civilization would want to simulate their ancestors, which is us. But why? Why would a hyper-advanced civilization spend enormous resources recreating the past? We do not spend our time simulating cavemen. Maybe civilizations advanced enough to run simulations would have widely different priorities. Okay, so here's what I think, and feel free to disagree with me in the comments, because I know this is going to be divisive. I think the simulation argument is one of the most interesting thought experiments of our time. But I also think people latch into it for the wrong reasons. Think about it. Why does this theory appeal to so many people, especially in the tech world? Because it takes the oldest question humanity has ever asked, which is if there is a creator or a purpose to all this, and it repackages it in a language that feels modern, scientific, and cool. It is creationism for people who do not want to go to church. And I do not say that as an insult. I think it is genuinely fascinating that humans keep circling back to the same fundamental question no matter what era we are in. Whether it is Plato's cave, or Descartes' demon, or Bostrom's simulation, we keep asking if what I see is actually real. Here is my honest take. I think we probably are not in a simulation. Not because the argument is bad, because it's actually quite elegant, but because I think the assumptions it rests on are shaky. We do not know if the computing power required is physically possible, and the argument leans heavily on probability in a way that might not be valid when we are talking about something this unprecedented. But, and this is the part that keeps me up at night, I also cannot rule it out. And that is, ambiguity is kind of the whole point. The simulation theory isn't really about whether we are in a computer. It is about the limits of human knowledge. It is about the fact that reality might be fundamentally stranger than our brains can comprehend. And if you think about it, that is pretty humbling realization regardless of whether we are simulated or not. The thing that actually bothers me more than the simulation question itself is what happens when people use it as an excuse. I have seen people online say things like, if it is all a simulation, then nothing really matters. And that is the laziest possible takeaway. Even if we are in a simulation, your experiences are real to you. Your pain is real. Your joy is real. The people that you love are real to you. Simulated or not, this is the only reality you have got. So you might as well take it seriously. So the big question is if any of this actually matters. Let me put it this way. Let us say tomorrow somehow we prove beyond any doubt that we are living in a simulation. Everything, including the stars and the oceans and your childhood memories, is all code. What changes? Here's what I think. Nothing and everything. Nothing changes practically. You still wake up tomorrow, you still have to eat and work and love and deal with people who do not use their turn signals. The simulation does not have a pause button for you personally, but everything changes philosophically. Because now, you know there is a creator not in the religious sense, but someone or something that designed the rules. And that opens up a whole new set of questions. Do they watch us? Can we communicate with them? Is there a purpose to the simulation? Or are we just a science experiment running in the background? Here is what is interesting to me though. Whether we are simulated or not, the ethical implications are actually the same. If morality matters in base reality, it matters in a simulation too. Because what makes something morally significant is not whether it is real in some cosmic sense, but whether there is genuine suffering and genuine joy involved. And if we are conscious and truly experiencing things, then it does not matter what substrate that consciousness runs on, carbon or silicon, neurons or code. The experience is what matters. In a weird way, the simulation question does not change the game. It just reminds us to pay attention to the game we are already playing. So look, I will leave you with this. Whether we are in a simulation or Plato's cave, or just floating on a rock in an indifferent universe, the fact that we can even ask these questions is remarkable. The fact that matter organized itself into something that can look up at the stars and wonder why it exists. That is either the most beautiful accident in the history of everything, or it was designed. And honestly, either option is pretty incredible. I want to know what you think. Are we in a simulation? Does it matter? Drop your thoughts in the comments.